So let me tell you guys something. I absolutely love throwing weightless soft plastics. You know, all across the country, I catch big fish on weightless Senkos, weightless flukes, weightless creature baits. I just love throwing them weightless. I find that it gets some big bites. But there are definitely times in my fishing experiences that fishing a soft plastic weightless is not only impractical, it is almost downright impossible and definitely not the proper way to go. In this video, we're gonna talk about all the many sizes and types of weights to help you guys become better bass anglers. My name's Tyler Anderson, let's talk about it. Well, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back to Tyler's Reel Fishing. I make it my goal on this channel to help you guys become better bass anglers, no matter where you are in your skill set and no matter where you are in the country. I hope my videos can point you guys towards one goal, which is catching more stinking bass. So I made a video a few months back that absolutely blew up my channel, and that was how to rig every soft plastic. I sat down on my boat, I literally took every soft plastic I had in my boat, from creature baits to worms to flukes to swim baits, and I showed you guys how to rig every single one of them, and that definitely helped a ton of people out. And due to the success of that video, I made a sequel to that one, kind of a part 2, which was how to fish every single soft plastic. So I'll have both of those videos linked below. But one lingering question from both of those videos in the comment sections was, Tyler, do you ever use weights on your soft plastics? Because in the rigging video, I didn't have any opportunities to show the usage or non-usage of weights in your Texas rigs or whatever other rigs I talked about. And especially in the how to fish every soft plastic, I basically did every single one of those weightless, besides maybe one or two. And so there's quite a few points I want to touch on. It's definitely going to be a ton of information. So get out your pen and paper, take some notes. But first, we're going to talk about the differences between the rate of fall with your soft plastic lure weightless versus weighted. Now, in order to understand rate of fall, you have to know what type of soft plastic you're throwing. So I have 3 different types of soft plastics in my hand. Right here, I have a KVD Perfect Plastic. It is just kind of your standard soft plastic. It's got tons of salt in it. It can sink pretty well on its own, but I think in order to get it down deep, you're gonna have to have a weight, as I'm gonna talk about. But I'm actually gonna break 3 of these soft plastics to show you the consistency of the soft plastic. So if I take this KVD Fluke right here and I pull it, takes a little bit of strength to pull it, but eventually you can rip it like that. And I'm not sure how healthy this is for you, but I'm gonna give each one of these a taste to tell you guys exactly why they behave the way they do. So this first lure here is very, gosh. That is very, very salty. And so what salt does is that it causes a lure to sink. The more infused with salt your soft plastic is, the heavier it is to cast, and of course, the quicker it sinks. Soft plastic 2 is this blade minnow here, which is meant to be on the back of a swim jig, the back of a chatterbait, that kind of thing. And it is a more rubbery style soft plastic, definitely less salt, and I'm gonna show that by pinching it. And there is actually literally no salt in this at all. So I guarantee it, if I was to throw this in the water, which I'm actually gonna do right now, it literally floats. Soft plastic literally floats on top of the water because it has no salt. And the third soft plastic I have is kind of the Elastec soft plastic. So if you were to see this regular soft plastic here, you can't really pull it that far before it breaks. It doesn't really have a whole lot of elasticity. The Elastec soft plastics, I can literally pull it that far without it breaking. And so as you can tell, there's not a whole lot of weakness to the structure of this soft plastic, but all 3 of these will fall differently in the water. And so if I was to throw all 3 of these in the water, my guarantee is this one is gonna sink just a tiny bit because I know it has, I can feel it, a little bit of salt in there. This one's gonna totally float because it has no salt, and this one is gonna sink because it has salt. And so you have to understand how quickly your lure sinks before applying your weight. Actually, I wanna see if I can break this. Gosh, holy cow. I legit can't break the soft plastic. I can't do it. I cannot. Oh, there we go. Ow, gosh. There's some entertainment for y'all. Ow. So if you want to fish a finesse worm, as I had here, an Elastec style worm, and you want to fish it on the bottom, you're going to have to put a weight on there. And if you're throwing a normal soft plastic with some salt, you're going to have to add a weight to get it down even deeper, even though it does have a rate of fall. So in this next part of the video, we're going to head to a pool real quick to show you guys some underwater footage of all the different sizes of weights and how quickly they cause your soft plastics to fall to the bottom. So we have arrived here underwater at my apartment complex pool. It was the only place I could find that had clear water and a blank background. And as you can see here, we are dropping my favorite, the weightless soft plastic Cinco. This is a 5-inch Strike King Ocho. And as you can see, it took about 6 seconds to fall to the bottom of the pool, which is in 5 feet of water right here at the edge. And so I'm going to have another angle pop up real quick. You guys know I love throwing weightless the most, and with a generic soft plastic like this with some salt in it, it usually falls about a foot a second, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on the line size you use. And as you can see, when I'm working it back in, even hopping it off the bottom, it still takes about a second for it to fall back down, giving those fish another chance to check it out if they're a little finicky. But here we moved on to 16th ounce weight. This is an unpegged. Most of these are going to be unpegged here, just to show you guys the difference between pegged and unpegged. And 16th is one that I use a ton. 16th and 8th, as you'll see in a second, are the two that I use the most often. And as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Takes about 4 seconds, at least counting from 1, to get from the top of the water to the bottom in 5 feet of water. And on 8th ounce, as you'll see the next one here, 1, 2, about 2.5 seconds to get to the bottom. So as you would expect, from 16th to 8th, the time it takes to drop drops in half. And as you can see by working it back along the bottom, it doesn't really have a whole lot of time for it to get back down there. So again, this is a situation where you have to get your worm or your lure a little bit deeper, but of course it will mean that it falls faster. Now here, we went all the way to 1/2 ounce. And this is really the heaviest that I'm going to go when it comes to fishing weighted soft plastics. As you can see, it falls in, what do you give it, 1 second from the bottom? 0, 1. Yeah, it takes about 1 second for it to fall. And that is just way too fast in most situations for my liking. So we're going to switch to a pegged weight. This is a pegged 16th ounce. And as you can see, it actually kind of spirals down there. I didn't realize until I was watching this footage how much your soft plastic moves throughout the water column on the x-axis when you have your weight pegged. So it kind of spirals down there like a tube does. But as you can see, the weight never separates from the worm. So that right there is what a pegged weight looks like. And lastly, I'm going to show you guys what it looks like for the belly weighted hook, as I mentioned. As you see, the bait falls down in the water, and it falls exactly how I talked about. With it shimmying down, doesn't fall nose forward, it falls directly flat across the x-axis, and it shimmies as it goes down. Now, of course, this hook is too big for that fluke. It's a 4-inch fluke with an 8-aught hook. But as you can see there, it definitely falls directly straight down. So let's head back on the boat and talk about the next part. So now that you all have seen the speed differences between different styles and weights of lures in getting a soft plastic creature bait to the bottom, as well as how fast or slow you are forced to work a soft plastic depending on how heavy your weight is, let's talk about another very important thing, and that is the ability of that weight to penetrate shallow cover. So when I'm flipping and pitching my soft plastic craws and creature baits in and around shallow cover, so I'm talking flooded trees, bushes, punching vegetation, that kind of stuff, you have to understand how your weight allows the lure to penetrate or not be able to penetrate through that cover. So let's say you have a soft plastic creature bait and you want to get through some standard lily pads. Lily pads really don't have a whole lot of strength to them, and so I think if you're flipping a 1/4 ounce weight just like this, you're not going to have a whole lot of issues getting that lure into that cover. Now let's say you're fishing some shallow bushes. Those bushes have kind of branches that are sticking out everywhere, and so in order to get to the heart of that bush where that fish is probably sitting at, especially the big ones, I would recommend something like a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce weight. These two weights here just present a little bit more oomph, I guess you could say, to get that lure into the cover, shake it around, and get it back out. If you're throwing a super lightweight, like a 16th ounce, with the soft plastic, especially one that might be Elastec material, you will not be able to get that lure in there because it'll fall super slow and won't have enough power to penetrate that cover. Bass live in some really, really heavy stuff. I'm talking about shallow water right now, and you're gonna have to have a heavy weight to get into that area. And when you are fishing in super heavy vegetation, I'm talking punching thick mats of milfoil, hydrilla, coontail, that type of grass, you're gonna need a heavy weight. This here is a 1 ounce. It is my most often used weight for flipping and pitching shallow cover, but there are certain places around the country where you're gonna have even thicker grass that a 1 ounce weight cannot get through. That's when I pull out the 1.5 ounce or the 2 ounce weight. This here is it's a big chungus. I mean, like, the difference between 1 ounce and 2 ounce, of course, is double the weight, but it is just a big old nasty weight. And of course, necessitates some big old nasty hooks, braided line, big heavy rod. That's what I wanted you guys to take away, is that when you're fishing shallow cover and you want to penetrate that cover, you have to throw the weight on your soft plastic that makes sense to get into that cover. The next thing that I wanted to bring up when it comes to picking your weight for your soft plastic is you have to understand that the heavier the weight you use, the more it digs into the bottom. And this applies for both pond anglers and boat anglers. So let's say you're fishing in and around a chunk rock. The heavier weight you use, the easier it is for that weight, because of how heavy it is, to snuggle its way into rocks and to get stuck. So of course I recommend the lightest you can get away with around rocks, especially big chunk rock, the better, because you're not going to lose as many lures. And when it comes to the pond anglers, a lot of ponds out there just have nasty bottoms. They have slime, they've got muck, they've got mud, dirty sand, and the heavier soft plastic you have, as you're dragging and hopping it across the bottom, not only is that weight going to be collecting that nasty grass, you have to constantly be cleaning off your lure after every single cast because it's digging into the bottom too much. And one other thing that a lot of people don't think about is that when it hops across the bottom, it disturbs the bottom. Sometimes, in the case of a football jig, I want it to disturb the bottom and cause a trail for that fish to follow and be able to find the lure. But if you're fishing in a dirty water situation, and the fish are having a hard time finding your lures anyways, I don't think it's very advantageous for you to be stirring up the bottom and making it harder for the fish to eat your lure. So again, you have to be cautious when it comes to selecting weights that are too heavy, because they might get you down there faster, you might be able to make more casts, but it might kind of turn those fish off by seeing the bottom be so disturbed by such a heavy weight. And of course, the heavier the weight, the more it makes noise across the bottom, which in some situations you want. But in most cases, fishing a soft plastic, I want it to be as finessey as possible. Now, one question that I get a ton when it comes to soft plastics and weights is if I peg my weights. So what that means, if you guys are unsure what pegging means, is that if you have your line here and your weight, you slide your weight on your line and you tie your hook. That is an unpegged weight. So you have your weight free flowing on your line. You know, when you cast it out there, the weight can separate from the hook and from the bait, but of course, as you work it back in, the weight stays pretty close to where the hook would be, just like I'm pinching it on my fingers here. And there's a certain time and place for that. In my experience, most of the time, I'm having my weight unpegged. And so what a weight peg is a piece of plastic that has a hole right down the middle that you can thread your line onto. So I have a little strand of pegs here, thread my line through the knot, or through the loop, and I'm gonna pull that peg onto my line. So now that I have a peg on my line, that weight can't go anywhere. So if you're fishing in shallow cover and you want your bait to be effectively presented into that heavy cover, you'll put a peg on, you will thread your line back on, and now, as you can see, oh, dang it. As you can see, the weight now can't go past where the peg is. So if we tie the hook here, or my fingers are pinching the line, and we slide the peg down, you'll see the weight has a lot less places to go. Now this is great, like I said, when you're trying to penetrate shallow cover. You really want the whole thing to be one compact unit, just like that. We have the weight slid all the way down to the hook, just like that. It is one compact unit. But the problem with pegging your weights all the time, and I found this out pretty early on in my fishing career, is that oftentimes, especially on bigger weights, the weight will be used as a battering ram inside the fish's mouth. So if he bites onto it like this right there, you set the hook, oftentimes that big weight coming out of its mouth with that hook penetrating can cause him to open his mouth like a battering ram, and the hook oftentimes misses getting inside the fish. So I prefer to have the weight separate from the bait itself, unless of course I have to get in some heavy cover. So let's say you have the weight here unpegged, the fish bites it and starts running away with it. That weight slides down, and you have a much higher percentage of getting a hook into that fish's mouth, because all you have now is the line to set the hook. And sure, the weight might slide down throughout the fight back onto their mouth, but you are having a direct line of sight without that battering ram of the big weight inside their mouth. So one last thing that I have to talk about is the differences between the two types of metals that make up all of the fishing weights out there. There is the traditional, cheaper style weight, which is lead, and there is the more expensive new age, which is tungsten. Lead, of course, has been used for a long time. We all know about lead sinkers, just like these split shot weights right here. I've used split shots for a long time when I'm crappie and pan fishing. In bass fishing, split shots don't really have a big place in my arsenal. I just don't really find that pinching 2 or 3 split shot weights to the top of my soft plastic is really the best way to go. I have found that lead is really, for most anglers, the best way to go. It is cheap, there's tons of them out there, and if you have the tendency of getting snagged a ton and losing your lures, I would highly recommend going with lead. But the more experienced you get as a bass angler, especially in my case with bass boats, tournaments, I want everything on my boat to give me the best possible chances of catching more fish. And so with tungsten being a more dense metal, of course, the sizes between lead for an 1/8 ounce versus tungsten for an 1/8 ounce is going to be pretty vast. So here I have, I'll show you guys a B-roll shot if you can't see it very well. I have an 1/8 ounce lead weight, and then I have an 1/8 ounce tungsten weight. And as you can see, hopefully from this B-roll shot and from my camera right now, the 1/8 ounce, quite a bit taller than the tungsten and is also quite a bit bigger. They literally weigh the exact same, the tungsten in this hand, the lead in this hand, and if that means that the fish hardly notices the weight in their mouth versus maybe they chomp down and they feel something, you know, oddly big and hard, I just feel like they might have a tendency to let go. I don't have any science behind that. I don't have any really anecdotal evidence to even back that, but I just want the best chances to catch fish possible, so I go with tungsten weights. And I don't bank fish a whole lot, so I don't really have you know, cases where I'm gonna get snagged a ton and lose a ton of tungsten weights. Most of the time when I get snagged, I can go with my trolling motor and, you know, stick my rod down there and get my lure back. So I hardly ever go through tungsten weights. As you can see, I have weights that literally have no paint left on them. That's how long I've used them for. So in my scenario, tungsten works great. But for you guys out there that are just beginning, don't want to spend a whole lot of money, and for you guys that bank fish, it is very hard to get lures unsnagged when you are on the bank because you can't actually go out there. You have a few angles that you can kind of snap your line from and try to get the lure unstuck. But when you're stuck, you're pretty much stuck. So lead is the way to go. The quality of build between a tungsten weight and a lead weight is definitely different. So if you're worried about your line getting frayed from your weight sliding up and down, tungsten is the way to go. They are a much higher quality built weight. This here is the Shields sports weight. I think they were like 98 cents, so they were definitely cheap, but you can tell they were cheaply made. The paint has, you know, weird chip marks in it. The lead will sometimes on the tip be kind of folded in, which means that it's super easy for your line to get frayed as the weight is sliding up and down. So if you want quality, go with tungsten. If you just want to save some money on your weights, go with lead. But there are other types of weights out there, two in specific. There is drop shot weights and there are Carolina rig weights. Just for the sake of this video, I guarantee you it's already way longer than I had hoped it would be, but I'm gonna actually make two separate videos this fall and this winter on the drop shot and the Carolina rigs, so stay tuned for those. And lastly, there's actually a type of weight for Texas rigs that is not on the top of the hook, and that is a belly weighted hook. This hook here, as you can see, has the weight infused onto the bottom of the hook. Belly weighted hooks are great for shad imitation style lures. So when it comes to stuff like the caffeine shad, the fluke, I love using belly weighted soft plastics because as that soft plastic falls to the bottom, instead of falling nose first as it would if it had a weight pegged to the front, it would fall nose first. A belly weighted hook causes it to kind of twitch around and then fall and shimmy right with the weight, you know, centered on the soft plastic. And so if I want my lure to fall in a different way than most people's, I will throw a belly weighted hook, but most of the time I will have the weight on the front because I want that lure to fall nose first. I'm tired. That was a lot of talking about weights. But as always, I hope this video helped you guys become better bass anglers. If you have any lingering questions about weights, let me know. I didn't talk about jig heads in this video. I didn't talk about stuff like wobble heads. There are tons of different styles to weight your worms and your soft plastics, but most of the time I'm just threading a weight on there with or without a peg and going to town on them. So thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time on TRF.